Welcome, everybody. This is Bill Allen, CEO of the Los Angeles County Economic Development Corporation. Great to see you all here with us today. We are delighted to have you back for these weekly webinars we're doing on the economic impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic on Los Angeles County. Since last session, when we shared with you that our economists would be publishing a research paper making some projections for what unemployment rates might rise to in the Southern California area, we published that research paper, and that's going to be the key essence of the presentation you'll hear today from Shannon Sedgwick, who's our director of our Institute for Applied Economics. I won't steal her thunder, but you will see that there are very high numbers that we are estimating based on the trends we're already seeing, based on a ground-up analysis of our at-risk sectors. And it's important knowing that we all as stakeholders in the region do everything we can to try and connect our small businesses, micro enterprises, and even nonprofit organizations in our region to the relief capital that is available at the federal, state, or local level. I'm going to give you a couple of updates on the PPP program, how the first round dollars were allocated, but also remind you all that the windows opened up again today for the second round and are likely to be oversubscribed as well as the first round was. There have been a number of estimates. The National Federation for Independent Businesses estimated there are 30 million small businesses in the country and that about 15 million of them applied. Only about 1.6 million loans were funded in the first round, so you can see that there are still a lot of loans in the pipeline. We have been receiving visitors to our coronavirus resource page. You can find that at laedc.org/coronavirus. We've had over 60,000 visits to that page in the last few weeks, where we daily update several times a day the resources that are available. There are a couple of new SBA loan programs coming online in addition to actually one loan program and one relief program on existing loan payments with SBA loans. And that data is being added to our site today. We have English and Spanish language versions of that material. We have material for micro enterprises, for nonprofits, for small businesses, even for individuals. We also have a lot of partners in the region who are helping us. So we're working with about 500, 600, 700 businesses right now through our award-winning business assistance team. We're working with hundreds more through our community connectory, which we want to again thank the philanthropic community for providing funding so we could add more multilingual staff to help smaller businesses and nonprofits access these funds. But we also have a lot of partners in the region. The Lucy Jones Center, LISC, the Local Initiative Support Corporation, the LA Chamber, and Wells Fargo's Foundation have combined on a series of webinars to help people answer some of the key questions they have about accessing these funds or surviving. So please look on our site and you will see referrals to the various webinars and partners who are available as well. I want to note that in the first round of SBA Paycheck Protection Program funding, California only got 9.7% of the funding. Now that's an SBA report of the first $342 billion of the $349 billion that was authorized. It shows that California got 9.7% or $33 billion. California could have been entitled to, or should have been entitled to, as much as 12% or more based on its share of unemployment filings across the country. And you'll hear more about that in the coming days, and I'll talk more about it after Shannon's presentation. But it's important to recognize that we all have to work really hard with our banking partners, our credit union partners, our community bank partners, and others to get as many applications through the process so that we can get as much capital in here to relieve the pressure on our small businesses and our communities. We're also encouraged that recovery task forces have been established since the last time we spoke. The federal government and state government have established recovery task forces, and our county has two motions to come before the Board of Supervisors tomorrow to establish recovery task forces and recovery initiatives across the county. Many of our cities have established recovery task forces as well. We've been involved with the planning of a lot of these and have been asked for suggestions for who can serve on them. And we have also issued a letter that will be entered into the public record today for the county, where we talk about the importance not just of reopening, but of longer-term recovery strategies that must include some reinvention of the way our economy operates in this region so that it can be more resilient. And so you'll hear us talking a lot about not just reopening, but reopening, recovery, reinvention, resilience that will lead to a resurgence over time in the Los Angeles area economy. So with that setup, I really want you to hear from Shannon today, because they have looked at all 10 Southern California counties, and they have done ground-up analysis that she'll explain. But it should be alarming, frankly, the potential to which unemployment may rise. These are estimates. They're not official forecasts. They are estimates based on the trends we're seeing. So allow me to introduce Shannon Cedric, the director of our Institute for Applied Economics, to share with you what they are learning.
Thank you, Bill. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining the LAEDC for these Monday morning updates on the economic implications of COVID-19. I hope that you and your families are continuing to stay safe at home through this global health crisis. This is the 6th week of the Safer at Home order, and while a number of states across the union have begun a phased reopening, the shutdown of non-essential businesses in California persists under the theory that resuming normal economic activity too soon may cause more harm than extending prohibitions on movement and business activity. The Los Angeles County's reported cases of COVID-19 are numbering over 19,500 in the county. That's 7,000 more cases than we reported last week. And our county share of all cases of COVID-19 in the state increased from 39% last week to just under 45% this week. And the number of deaths reached over 900 over the weekend, and that's 300 more than last week. However, efforts being taken to contain the spread of the coronavirus are impacting the economy. Individuals are continuing to lose their jobs as businesses remain closed. In the last 5 weeks, just under 3.2 million filings for initial unemployment insurance benefits in California were reported. In light of the dramatic effect that the COVID-19 pandemic is having on employment, the LAEDC's Institute for Applied Economics placed its focus on quantifying the employment impact for the 10-county Southern California region in the short term. We know the Safer at Home order will be in effect until May 15th, so we created occupational projections for what initial job loss related to the COVID-19 stay-at-home order could look like in May 2020 in Southern California. We'd like to note that the following estimates are based solely on the initial response to COVID-19 in the Southern California region. This remains an incredibly fluid situation. Accordingly, all of the uncertainties and changing conditions in terms of job losses, containing the virus, length of stay-at-home orders, consumption levels, supply changes, and more mean that projections and forecasts made in the midst of this crisis could vary from real outcomes. Last Monday, we identified industries with the highest risk of job loss based on whether they have been mandated to close or are considered non-essential. These include industries such as accommodation and food services, other services, which includes personal services like hair and nail salons, retail trade with a large number of small and micro businesses, and arts, entertainment, and recreation. We're supposed to practice safe distancing, and we know the physical proximity required for workers across different occupations, along with the number of workers in each occupation. For example, dental hygienists work very close in proximity to their patients. Baristas work at an arm's length from their customers. Video game designers often work in shared office space. Petroleum engineers typically work in their own office. And creative writers don't typically work around anyone. In this way, we can determine which occupations have been and will continue to be most affected by COVID-19. We can use all of this knowledge to create preliminary short-term projections of initial job loss, focusing on occupational groups, and estimate what the unemployment rate could look like while the economy is on hold. We examine each of the region's 8 metropolitan statistical areas, or MSAs, that extend from San Luis Obispo to San Diego. This region accounted for 10.3 million jobs last year and includes the important hub of the Los Angeles, Long Beach, Anaheim MSA, which itself contributes 6.5 million jobs to the economy. Initial projections for unemployment in the Southern California region are associated with an unemployment rate that may reach 31.4% in May 2020. Based on what we're already seeing with the initial unemployment claims data, we expect unemployment to spike precipitously across the region, with unemployment rates across Southern California ranging from 29.8% in San Diego, Carlsbad, to 40.4% in El Centro in May. We expect travel restrictions, closures of non-essential businesses, and lockdowns to hit especially hard across all areas. In terms of the change in jobs, the Southern California region as a whole is projected to experience an employment decline of 27.4% year over year. Across the 8 MSAs in Southern California, all seem to have projected year-over-year employment declines of between 20 and 30%. But of course, there's a different order of magnitude between the populations of the different service areas. So this 10-point percentage range looks and feels very different when you are looking at the actual number of jobs that may be lost across the regions. Initial projections for the number of jobs lost in May 2020 from May of last year in Southern California exceeds 2.8 million. The Los Angeles MSA is projected to lose over 1.7 million jobs, followed by the Inland Empire with over 431,000 jobs lost, and San Diego with 407,000 jobs lost over the same period. Conversely, El Centro, with a much smaller population, is projected to lose just over 15,000 jobs from the previous year. Since we always try to drill down to the local impacts for you during these webinars, let's look at the initial estimates of job loss related to COVID-19 in the Los Angeles, Long Beach, Anaheim MSA specifically. As you may remember from our last webinar, the immediate economic effects of COVID-19 have not been equally distributed in our MSA. Higher income workers in professional services, management, and computer and mathematical occupations have made the transition to work remotely. Not only have their jobs been somewhat inoculated, if not protected over the short term, but these households are also likely to have higher savings rates. In stark contrast, lower income workers in personal care, retail, and food preparation occupations do not have the option to complete their duties without interacting with the public. As such, the rates of job losses in these 3 occupational groups are overwhelming, ranging from 60 to 70% job loss in the Los Angeles, Anaheim MSA, and throughout Southern California. Conversely, computer and mathematical occupations are expected to experience the least amount of job loss, with just under 4%. The 3 major occupation groups of food preparation and serving, sales and related, and personal care and service occupations, all of which tend to be lower income occupations, are expected to account for half of all projected job loss in the Los Angeles, Anaheim MSA. An extremely high proportion of small businesses will face liquidity issues, particularly in Los Angeles County, where 93% of businesses are truly small, employing fewer than 20 workers. Those in the non-essential and service sectors have lost the majority of their consumer base, and the medium and long-term outlook for employee retention is suboptimal as operations attempt to simply keep themselves afloat as these closure orders continue. In conclusion, while the economic situation is, in a word, dire, Governor Gavin Newsom has cautioned that lifting the stay-at-home order too soon could have unacceptably high mortality and healthcare system burdening consequences. As such, a painstaking and very gradual phased process of resuming economic activity is expected. Employment levels will take time to recover, and when they do, the composition of the regional workforce may look significantly different. Businesses may be forced to close permanently after an extended period without income, and many workers may not have jobs to return to as social distancing measures are kept in place or as residents change their consumption behaviors to even beyond the eventual easing of social distancing measures. Much remains to be seen. Next, Bill and I will be answering questions.
Thank you very much, Shannon and Bill. So our first question for today is for you, Shannon. Does this analysis include government employees?
Yes, it does. While government is usually separated out when looking at industry classifications, which are based on the activity taking place within an establishment, occupations are classified according to job duties or tasks shared by workers with the same occupation working across all industries, like customer service representatives or a payroll clerk. So in this analysis, nurses include those working at private hospitals as well as county hospitals or state-run facilities, and teachers include those working at both public and private schools.
Thank you, Shannon. Bill, next question is for you. How have or could so many jobs be lost when the small business stimulus was adopted in part to financially reward, incentivize employers to maintain their workforce? In addition, will we know which companies, industries in LA County have received and taken advantage of this funding?
So I'm not sure at what point we may learn what sectors on a county basis received first round funding, but we do know what sectors across the country did, and I'll touch on that in a moment. The first part of the question really about how many jobs, so many jobs be lost in light of all the stimulus programs. We should remember these jobs started to be lost in the week ended March 14, even before the stay-at-home orders. And then in the week ended March 21 and March 28, we saw a significant number. I think there were 1 million unemployment filings in California in one of those first weeks after the stay-at-home orders. The PPP program only opened up for applications April 3rd. It took about 2 weeks for people to process the first round, and people didn't really start getting the funds until middle of April. So we certainly hope that as funds start flowing from the banks through this program, that it may allow some businesses not to lay off additional employees. It may allow other businesses to bring back their employees. So we certainly hope that the rate that we've been seeing of unemployment filings will moderate somewhat. But we just don't know. It's not clear yet. We do know, as I alluded to earlier, that California only got 9.7% of the funding. That was $33 billion. We should have gotten billions more if we had our fair share of our unemployment filings or of our population. We know that LA County is about a quarter of California's population, so that would imply that about 8 to 9 billion of those dollars came to LA County. That's a pretty small fraction of LA County's quarterly annual payroll. I think it's over $60 billion each quarter are in business payrolls in this region. So it's only going to have a modest effect, but an important one. Anyone that we can keep on payroll or with a company so there isn't a dislocation that makes it more difficult for that company to restart is important. People have asked, what industries did this money go to? So nationally, the largest recipient was the construction industry with $45 billion, about 13% of all the program money. Next was professional scientific and technical services, which received about 12.6% of the money, or $43 billion. Manufacturing, $41 billion, or about 12%. Healthcare and social assistance, $39.9 billion, 11.6%. Note that I haven't mentioned yet accommodation and food services or retail trade, two of the areas where we have the largest numbers of people in Southern California whose jobs are at risk and who've likely been subject to layoffs. They came in 5th and 6th. So accommodation and food services got $30 billion and retail trade about 29.4, only about 8.9 and 8.6% respectively. So I think that's why, despite that enormous sounding number nationally of $349 billion and now another $310 billion coming online, we still have seen so many people laid off and will probably continue to. And again, remember the figure I gave you earlier from the National Federation of Businesses, that a survey they conducted showed 70% of small businesses in America tried to apply about 72% of them reported through the survey having applied successfully in terms of submitting an application, not being funded. We know that therefore, if there were 15 million applications and only 1.6 million loans funded, there are probably another 13 million loans in the system awaiting approval decisions. So it's going to take some time for this capital to work its way to companies. And while they're waiting, unfortunately, they're running out of the ability to hang on to their present employees. But we certainly hope those who get the funding will be able to bring employees back.
Excellent. Thanks, Bill. Shannon, next question is for you. Is the LA County economy more susceptible or better positioned to withstand this extended coronavirus shock than other parts of the state or the nation? I'll also mention that we've received this question several times today live in the Q&A as well.
Well, we have already covered some of the more susceptible parts of the LA County economy. So there's a large number of workers employed in industries where businesses have been mandated to close, and several key industries such as international and domestic tourism and the film and television industry have grinded to a halt here. These key industries have larger shares of workers, and they account for larger contributions to the GCP or gross county product than in other areas. And the large number of micro businesses across all industries are vulnerable. We have a higher cost of living compared to other areas, and a large number of low wage earners that find themselves out of work. The county does find itself in a better position when it comes to their large professional business services sector. So high tech and other knowledge-based jobs have been able to transition to working remotely. And a significant number of individuals in LA County are classified as essential workers who are still employed and earning wages through all of this.
Excellent. Thank you, Shannon. Bill, a question for you. We've had a lot of inquiries from businesses in various sectors asking if the LAEDC has any idea what a reopening process will look like and when that may happen. We've had that from various sectors, including personal care.
And it's a question we're asking our government partners as well. There is still too much uncertainty around the standard by which we'll be able to reopen different sectors of the economy. So first, there are public health and safety standards that have to be clearly determined and articulated. There has to be a little bit of time for businesses to comply with those standards. There are going to have to be operational protocols related to physical distancing, safety protocols related to masks and other personal protective equipment that may have to be worn by employees or customers coming into an establishment. There's going to have to be more testing made available. And so it's too soon for anybody, I think, reasonably to project when any sector, again, as Shane said, we've got a lot of questions about when might manufacturing, when might restaurants, when might personal services, salons be able to reopen. It's too soon, but as I say, the good news is the governor established a task force that is already breaking up into working groups to tackle that question at a state level. The county has 2 motions coming on Tuesday. I expect that they will either merge them or vote on one to ensure that there are not only task forces made up of advisors from business and labor and other stakeholders in the community, but also different internal teams working on this question. Everyone knows that we need to get this economy started again, but everyone also knows that we need to do it in a safe way so we don't have a spike or a rebound in cases that causes us to have to go back into stay-at-home orders for any extended period of time. So there are groups working. We're in conversation with some of those, including individual companies that have released remarkable protocols. I've mentioned on some webinars that Wynn Resorts out of Las Vegas has issued a remarkable document that can be publicly downloaded from their Wynn Resorts website with very specific cleaning protocols. I know the theme parks are thinking of creative ways of changing the way we experience theme parks, where there may be virtual lines instead of actual physical lines for rides. You might get a remote buzzer like you do in some restaurants that tells you when you can ride a particular ride. I know the restaurant industry is looking at different ways of organizing their tables and maybe even putting tables outside, which we certainly have been recommending for those restaurants who have a space in front of the restaurant, whether it's on a sidewalk or on a private property of a outdoor development. It would seem appropriate and safe to perhaps add another table or two properly distanced outside so that more patrons could be served and therefore more employees of our food and accommodation services area could be brought back to work. But all this is being dealt with right now by public health officials, epidemiologists, virologists, and others. And there'll be more news to come in the coming weeks from these various task forces, and we'll share it with you as soon as we learn anything, but I think they'll also be sharing it publicly. I'm quite sure it won't be before May 15 because the orders are clearly established then, and I wouldn't be surprised to see those orders extended a little further before different sectors are allowed to open again.
Perfect. And the next question is both for both of you, Bill and Shannon. So Shannon, I'll let you go first. How did the PPP factor into your current unemployment projections? And if they didn't, how many jobs do you think PPP could save in the LA County region?
Well, the PPP is still evolving. We didn't include its impact in this preliminary analysis. It's hard to say exactly how many jobs will be saved throughout the program. It really depends on whether the funds are reaching the most vulnerable businesses, micro businesses, for instance.
Yeah, and as I said earlier, our piece of that, if we simply use population, which that's a very gross estimate. We could be wrong on that. But as I said, if California got $33 billion of the first round and we represent a quarter of the population, assuming that we applied as successfully as the rest of California did, you might determine that we received $8 or $9 billion of that first round of funding. And then the question is, when do those dollars come to businesses in LA County? What percentage of our LA County total quarterly payroll does that represent? And what percent of those dollars do people choose to spend on payroll? Because remember, they can spend it on payroll, they can spend it on rent, they can spend it on utilities. So there are so many variables. I think it wouldn't have been appropriate for our economists to try to factor that in yet. I think what they were trying to show is that with the trends we were seeing in unemployment and the numbers of jobs in the most at-risk sectors, we were on a path to reach as much as 31% unemployment. We hope we won't get that high. We hope that we will get these dollars put to good use and that payroll will be emphasized and that the numbers may only reach into the mid to high 20s. But it should be a call to action for all of us to ensure that we're doing everything we can, not only to connect our small businesses, particularly, as Shannon said, the most vulnerable ones who have the least amount of capital to withstand this sort of economic shock. We need to get that capital to them, and we need to be doing what our state, county, and local governments are also doing, which is developing their own additional loan programs, using their own resources, using community development block grant resources, using philanthropic resources to fill in the gaps. As we've mentioned previously, our undocumented immigrants are not provided for in these federal programs, and yet they do contribute significantly to our businesses. And so it's important that many of the loan programs and grant programs that have been initiated are available from state or local sources for that population and others. So there's a lot of work yet to be done. I'm proud of the work our business assistance team is doing, our community connector is doing, and all of our partners throughout the region. And I would remind you all, as we prepare to close, to reach out to any small business that you may know, any nonprofit on whose board you serve or that you've donated to, and make sure they're getting their applications into the queue. Some of their banks will tell them, as we are hearing today, that they're not accepting any more applications. They have too many in their backlog. Others will say they're only accepting applications if you bank with them. Keep making calls. I think there were 4,900 lenders who actually made loans in the first round. There's $60 billion set aside for microenterprises and nonprofits and disadvantaged communities in this next round, and more CDFIs and credit unions are coming online. The SBA's own website tells you in a radius around your address where the lenders are that qualify in the program. You need to be reaching out to them or reaching out to us for help in order to be able to access these dollars. And even if you don't get money in the second round, there is likely to be a third round of Paycheck Protection Program allocations because there is so much need yet remaining in our communities.
Excellent. Well, thank you both, Bill and Shannon, for once again this fourth week of sharing your insights into the economic implications of COVID-19. Announcement to everyone, we will be continuing these on to next week and through the month of May. So please look out for an email that will provide you a registration link for next Monday's webinar, which will take place at 11 a.m. And please continue to submit your questions to us. You can submit your questions by emailing me at Shane, SHANE, .cullen@laedc.org. It is currently on your screen right now. And we also recommend you utilize the resources on the LAEDC COVID-19 response page, which can be found at laedc.org/coronavirus. We hope you will join us next Monday, May 4th at 11 a.m. And thank you once again, and everyone have a wonderful week.
And Shane, just to clarify, I want to ask Shannon, sorry to do it live. Next week, are we going to talk a little bit about the fiscal impacts on our local cities and county government?
We are taking a look at the fiscal impacts of our local governments, our 88 cities. We are trying our best to get it done by next Monday, but it's possible that it will be pushed another week beyond.
All right, well, stay in touch with us over the next few weeks, folks. We'll have some interesting insights about the impact, which will be very real on our local governments.
Thank you. Have a great day, everyone.
Stay safe.